You wait before the sun, not because you choose to, but because your body has learned over the years that the north does not wait for anyone. Dawn here is a slow, reluctant thing. Light drags itself across the horizon as if it must wrestle its way through the cold, just as you do. Even inside the longhouse, where the coals from last night still glow faintly beneath a mound of ash, your breath escapes in pale white clouds. You lie still for a moment, letting the weight of the furs sink into your skin. The ground beneath you is hard-packed earth, familiar and unfriendly. The cold has seeped into it overnight, creeping up through the bedding to nudge you awake. You're used to this sensation. In the north, warmth is something you earn, not something you wake up with. Your joints feel stiff, your fingers numb at the tips, but none of it is new. This is the rhythm of your life. When you finally push yourself upright, the longhouse creaks quietly, its timber frame expanding and settling in the contrasting warmth of inside versus outside. The air smells of dried fish, old wood, and lingering smoke. Around you, other warriors and family members shift under their blankets, murmuring, stretching, preparing themselves for the demands of another day. A couple of dogs lift their heads and sniff the air before curling back into tight circles. You stand, adjust the fur draped over your shoulders, and reach for your boots. The leather is cold to the touch. As you lace them, you can hear the wind outside pressing against the walls. It has a low, hollow sound, kind that suggests incoming change. Storm, maybe, or simply the north reminding everyone that it always has the power to kill. When you step outside, the cold hits you like a slap across the face, the kind that wakes you fully, without mercy. Frost coats everything you can see. Rooftops, the ground, even the edges of the wooden beams that mark the entrance to your home. Every step you take crunches beneath your weight, a brittle sound echoing through the morning quiet. Your village rests by the fjord, a cluster of longhouses arranged to shield one another from the worst of the wind. Smoke rises from a handful of chimneys as early risers coax flames back to life. You pull your cloak tighter as a gust of icy wind barrels through the settlement, carrying the sharp scent of pine and sea salt. The sea is restless. Even at dawn, its waves slap the shoreline with the impatience of a hungry god. You pause for a moment, letting your gaze settle on the dark stretch of water. Somewhere across that horizon lie other lands, places you've raided, places you've dreamed of raiding, places you've only heard of in tales told around the fire. But here, in this moment, the world is quiet. Just you, the cold, and the heavy breath of the sea. A raven lands on the roof beam above the longhouse door. It watches you with glossy eyes, unblinking, head tilted as if weighing your worth. Ravens are never just birds to your people. They are watchers, messengers, signs. You nod to it out of instinct, acknowledging its presence, acknowledging that its presence means something, even if you don't yet know what. The village slowly stirs around you. A woman emerges from a nearby house, rubbing her arms against the cold before walking toward a cooking pit. A group of boys carries firewood, their faces red from the wind. A warrior you know, a large man with a braided beard and a scar across his throat, sharpens his axe on a stone, sparks flying briefly before disappearing into the frost. In the distance, goats bleat impatiently, demanding morning care. You take all of it in. The sounds, the scents, the motions. Your mornings always begin like this. Not rushed, not idle, but measured. A Viking learns early that survival demands awareness. Any shift in the wind, any unusual bird call, any unfamiliar shape on the horizon can shape the entire day. You breathe deeply, scanning the world the way you always do. Your breath leaves your mouth in thick clouds. You watch them float away, dissolving into the cold air. There's a strange comfort in that. A reminder of your place in this landscape. Not dominant, not fragile, but part of an ongoing negotiation between life and harshness. You stretch your arms above your head, feeling muscles crackle back to life. The cold makes everything slower, heavier, but not impossible. You're built for this. From childhood, your days have been shaped by this climate. Learning to walk on ice without slipping, learning to swing an axe with stiff fingers, learning to row through frigid waters until your muscles screamed. The North has been both your teacher and your test. As the sky transitions from deep blue to a weak gray, the sun finally appears, just barely, peeking above the mountains. The light is muted, filtered through layers of cloud, but it's enough to cast a soft glow across the frozen earth. You feel it touch your face, and for a brief moment, you allow yourself to enjoy the illusion of warmth. Around you, the village fully awakens. The sound of chopping wood, barking dogs, and clanging metal fills the air. Families gather around small fires, distributing morning duties. Warriors prepare their gear. Fishermen inspect their nets. Hunters check the conditions of their bows. Every person here contributes something. Every person wakes with purpose. You run your fingers along the hilt of your axe, feeling the familiar grooves worn into the handle. You haven't yet decided whether today will bring training, hunting, or preparations for the next raid. But the day is wide open, waiting. For now, you simply stand in the frost-covered morning, watching your world unfold. A world built on strength, danger, loyalty, and cold. And as you inhale deeply, you feel the truth settle in your bones. The North wakes with you, and it expects you to rise to meet it. Before the village fully spills into its rhythm, you turn toward the small storage shelter beside your longhouse. It isn't much to look at from the outside, with its planks held together by iron nails that have seen too many winters, animal hides nailed over gaps to keep the wind from slithering in. But inside lies something far more meaningful than dry tools or firewood. Your weapons, your responsibility, your history. The smell hits you as soon as you pull aside the hide curtain. Old leather, oiled metal, and faint traces of pine tar. You kneel beside the low wooden chest, running your hand along its lid before lifting it. The hinges creak, complaining about the cold, but they obey. Inside, wrapped in a simple wool cloth, rests your axe. Not the training axe you use for chopping logs or sparring. Not the basic one issued to every young fighter. This one is yours, marked by your life, shaped by your hands, and sharpened by the lessons you've bled for. You unwrap it slowly, not out of ritualistic drama, but because you genuinely respect the weight of it. The blade catches the weak morning light, sending a muted gleam toward the ceiling. Tiny nicks along the edge tell stories. Old raids, narrow escapes, battles fought in the mud or the snow. The grain of the wooden handle has darkened with years of sweat, grime, and effort. You run your thumb along the flat of the blade. Cold. Colder than the morning air. Colder than the sea. It's a good cold. A dependable cold. Behind you, the village noise grows. Hammer striking metal. Goats complaining again. Children laughing as they chase each other through frost. Life moves. And in that movement, you feel an old pull. Not pressure exactly, but a sense of obligation that never really leaves a Viking warrior. In your world, being strong isn't just for yourself. It's for your clan, your kin, your land, and the people who rely on you when the world turns dangerous. You gather your gear piece by piece. Leather bracers first, stiff but familiar. A wool tunic thick enough to keep your core warm, but loose enough to move freely. The cloak, heavy with frost-resistant fur. As you dress, you can almost hear your father's voice, low and steady in your memory. The cold tests you before your enemies do. If you can't stand against the wind, you won't stand against steel. He wasn't a gentle man. The North rarely produces gentle men, but he taught you well. When your preparations are done, you settle the axe across your back and step outside again. The sun has climbed a little higher, just enough to paint the village in a pale, metallic wash. Your breath still fogs the air, though the wind has calmed slightly. You take a step toward the training grounds at the edge of the settlement, boots crunching against the icy earth. The training circle waits, a clearing of trampled snow, bordered by wooden dummies, shields stuck into the ground, and a rack of spears thick with frost. More warriors gather there already. Some stretch stiff shoulders, others spar lightly, wooden shields clacking with familiar rhythm. When you enter the circle, a few nod to you in acknowledgement. No greetings needed. Respect is spoken in glances here. You pick up a round shield from the rack, testing its weight. The rim is cold enough to bite into your palm. A young warrior stands nearby, perhaps 15 winters or so, watching you with that hungry curiosity that only new fighters have, wanting to learn, wanting to prove something, wanting to survive the world he's just stepped into. You hand him the shield. Hold it steady. You tell him. Your voice is low but firm, without the softness of a teacher or the sharpness of a drill master. Just truth, just guidance. He nods quickly, gripping it with both hands. You tap the edge of the shield with the butt of your axe. The shield should move with you, not against you. Don't let it collapse inward. Let it breathe. The boy adjusts, shoulders rolling back as he steadies himself. You can see the tension in his arms, the uncertainty in his stance. But that's normal. Skill grows in tiny increments, like frost forming on wood. You give him a small nod before stepping back. The training continues around you. Grunts, thuds, the whistle of air displaced by practice swings. There's a rhythm to these sessions, almost meditative. Every clash of wood and metal is a rehearsal for survival. Every controlled motion is an agreement between discipline and instinct. You breathe deeply, letting your muscles warm, letting your body reacquaint itself with the weight of steel and the expectations placed upon you. A Viking does not exist alone. You rise because others rise with you. You fight because others depend on you. You train because someday the real strike won't be practice, and the real shield won't get a second chance to hold. And as your blood begins to move, your pulse aligning with the pulse of the village, a quiet truth settles over you. Strength is not a choice here. It is the price of survival. The training circle gradually empties as the morning stretches forward, steam rising from sweat-warm bodies into the crisp air. Your muscles hum with the familiar burn of movement, not painful, just awake, alive, ready. The kind of readiness that comes from years of carrying iron and living by its promise. You sling your axe low at your side and start toward the forest path just beyond the longhouses. The village stands behind you like a cluster of stubborn wooden beasts, smoke twisting from rooftops, ravens perched on beams, people moving between tasks with the steady resolve carved into all who survive northern winters. But beyond those roofs, the world opens into something wider, wilder, and far less forgiving. And today, like most days, you have to walk straight into it. Your boots crunch over the frost-packed earth, each step sinking just slightly into snow that never fully melts this time of year. The path narrows as you move under the bare-boned branches of the trees, their limbs clawing at the sky. The cold bites at your cheeks again, sharper in the shadowed woods than in the village, but your breath is steady. Your cloak flares behind you when the wind chooses to rise. This walk isn't just travel, it's transition. A Viking warrior is many things: farmer, hunter, defender, raider when fate demands it. Today, you wear the roles of both protector and provider. On days like this, you scout the outskirts, check traps, assess threats, gather what the village needs long before the sun sinks toward the sea. The forest is quiet in that eerie northern way, where silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something ancient listening. You move with the ease of someone who's walked these paths since childhood, every landmark carrying a personal history. The crooked pine split by lightning, the large stone that resembles a sleeping boar, the creek that freezes early every winter. After some distance, you kneel to check one of the traps hidden behind a fallen log. The bait is gone, the snow disturbed, but the snare hangs empty. You frown slightly and run 2 fingers along the ground. Tracks light, almost delicate. A fox, clever little thief. It's irritation, but not anger. Foxes have a right to survive the winter too. You reset the trap, pack the snow intentionally, and move on. The deeper you go, the more the forest shifts. The light grows dimmer, the air heavier, the silence thicker. You adjust your grip on your cloak as the temperature drops further, cold threading through the wool. You keep your other hand close to the axe at your hip, not because you expect danger, but because danger never asks for permission out here. After half an hour of steady walking, you reach a small rise in the land where the trees thin. From this vantage point, the world opens in a long stretch of frost-kissed wilderness, rolling hills, frozen streams, Smoke trails from distant settlements, the faint outline of the sea far beyond, shimmering like hammered steel under the pale daylight. You stand there for a moment, breathing in the cold until your lungs ache. It's a strange kind of serenity. The North doesn't comfort you with warmth or softness. It comforts you with truth, with clarity, with the reminder that nothing is guaranteed, so everything matters. You crouch again to examine a set of deeper tracks etched into the snow downhill from your position. These aren't fox, not deer. Broad, heavy, human, and not from your village. Your jaw tightens. You press your palm to the print and feel how recently the snow has settled around it. Not long ago. Maybe an hour. Maybe less. Out here, that matters. You rise slowly, scanning the horizon. Your breath fogs the air in short bursts now. Not from exertion, but from instinct sharpening. You listen. Nothing. But the quiet feels different. Charged. You follow the tracks only a short distance before crouching behind a thick, gnarled tree. Up ahead, in a clearing half veiled by frost, you spot movement. Two figures. Cloaks. Spears. Foreign patterns on their clothing. Too far to hear their words, but near enough to see that they're not wandering aimlessly. Scouting. Hunting. Testing borders. Your village needs to know. You retreat the way you came. Careful steps, no noise, no haste. Your heartbeat steadies not from fear, but from purpose sharpening like a blade. By the time you break from the forest and return toward the village outskirts, the sky has shifted toward a pale silver, hinting at midday. Smoke rises stronger from the longhouses. Children chase each other through the snow. Dogs bark at ravens perched on roof beams. Life continues, unaware that the world beyond the tree line might not remain quiet for long. And as you walk back toward home, boots leaving deep impressions in the frost, one thought persists with the weight of steel. A warrior's peace is never permanent. It is only the quiet between choices. By the time you reach the village edge, the cold has softened into something more breathable. The winter never truly loosens its grip. Your boots crunch over packed snow as you head straight toward the longhouse where the warriors gather. Your mind still replaying the footprints, the foreign faces, the way the forest had gone silent. Inside, warmth hits you first. Firelight dances on wooden walls carved with stories older than anyone alive. Men and women sit sharpening blades, repairing shields, oiling leather. The air is thick with the scent of pine pitch, smoke, and iron. Familiar, grounding. You step in, closing the heavy door behind you. A few heads lift. Some nod. One of your closest shieldmates, Eirik, raises an eyebrow as he tightens the binding on his spear. You look like you've seen a draugr. He grunts. Not draugr. You answer, pulling off your gloves. Strangers, two of them, past the old boar stone. That wipes the smirk from his face. For few heartbeats, the only sound is the sharpening of whetstones. Even the fire seems to crackle more quietly, as if listening. Strangers that close to the settlement mean one thing. Someone is testing borders, and when borders are tested, shield walls follow. Your Jarl, seated near the fire, lifts her gaze. She's older than most in the hall. Her hair a braided river of silver, her shoulders broad beneath a cloak lined with wolf fur. She stands slowly, each movement deliberate. Tell me what you saw. You recount the tracks, the timing, the clothing, the weapons, every detail you noticed without consciously noticing. Training makes the mind a trap. It catches things even when you aren't trying. When you finish, the Jarl lets out a long breath. So, not merchants, not wanderers. Her eyes harden. Scouts. A murmur ripples through the warriors. Eirik grips his spear tighter. If they scout, they plan. If they plan, they intend. And intention, the Jarl finishes, can turn to blood. She gestures toward the weapon racks. Arm yourselves. Quietly. If conflict comes, it won't come with warning. You nod and move toward your gear. Your axe hangs where you left it last night, darkened steel catching the fire's glow. You lift it, feeling the familiar balance in your hand. The weight is comforting, like greeting an old friend who never lies. Beside it hangs your shield, painted with the symbol of your bloodline. You run your thumb across its rim, checking for cracks. None. The wood is solid, reinforced from raids past, scarred in the ways that matter. You strap it to your arm and exhale slowly. You never rush into fear. You walk into it the way Vikings always have, with purpose, with clarity, with the knowledge that death is not the worst fate. The worst fate is failing the people who depend on you. A horn blows outside the longhouse. Not an alarm, a gathering call. You step into the open air along with the others. The village has formed a loose semicircle in the main clearing. Elders, children, hunters, warriors. Even the dogs stand alert, ears pricked toward the forest. The Jarl raises her voice, shaped more by iron than age. We defend what is ours, but we do not strike blindly. Today we watch. Today we measure. And if the gods will battle to our doors, then we answer. A unified rumble of agreement rolls across the crowd. Resolve, fear, duty, pride, all tangled together. You stand in the front line with the other fighters, the shield resting against your leg, the axe hanging low. Your heartbeat is steady, your mind sharp. You know this feeling well. The edge of tension before the world chooses a direction. A young boy squeezes between two adults and hands you a strip of cloth woven with simple blue and white threads. A protection charm. You crouch slightly so he can tie it around your wrist. For him to watch you, he says. You give him a small nod. And for Thor to watch you. He beams and scurries back to his mother. As the village disperses into quiet preparation, your steps drift toward the outer fence. You climb the small rise just beyond the last longhouse. From here, you can see the forest stretching endlessly forward, dark and solemn under the pale sky. The world looks calm, sleeping almost, but you know better. Your fingers tighten around your shield strap. In your chest, you feel the silent truth every warrior learns. Peace is not the absence of enemies. Peace is the space between storms. And a storm is turning toward you. The forest swallows you with the first few steps. Not literally, of course, but in the old way. In the way that makes every branch feel like a rib of some great beast you're walking into. The snow here is thinner, broken by patches of dark earth, and old roots twisting like veins beneath your boots. Behind you, the village is already fading into distance. Ahead, the trees stand so tall they seem to hold up the sky itself. You tighten the wolf fur cloak around your shoulders and let your breath ease into a slow rhythm. Out here, you cannot think like a villager. You cannot think like a builder or a father or a friend. Out here, you think like a hunter, like a warrior, like someone who understands that the forest is older than you, older than kingdoms, older than the runes carved into your arm. It knows you're here. It always knows. Eirik walks beside you, steps heavy but quiet, his spear angled downward. His breath fogs the air. You think they're still close. He asks. Tracks were fresh. You answer. They might be deeper in. He grunts. Good. I'd hate to come all this way just to chase ghosts. You don't respond. Because it isn't ghosts you're worried about. It's intentions. It's plans set in motion far from your eyes. It's strangers who felt comfortable enough to walk so close to your borders. Fox tracks cross the path. A raven watches from a branch above, feathers black as the void between stars. It cocks its head, silent, studying you with unsettling intelligence. Eirik spits into the snow. Odin's bird, he mutters. Never know if that's good or bad. Depends who it follows, you say. The raven flaps away, deeper into the trees. You keep walking. Eventually, you reach the clearing where the forest suddenly gives way to a flat stretch of frost-covered ground. In the middle sits the old stone, a massive slab half buried in earth, its surface carved with spirals and lines no one living can fully decipher. It marks the place where borders blur, where the old ways mingle with the new, where the stories whisper louder. It also lies close to where you saw the strangers yesterday. You crouch, brushing snow from a shallow impression in the mud. A footprint. Human. Not one of yours. Lighter step, Narrower stride, no fur-lined boot. Southern, warmer lands. Your pulse shifts. Ira crouches beside you. Not good. No. The wind moves across the clearing, pushing loose snow across the stone. It whistles between the branches above, carrying something thin and distant, a feeling more than a sound. Something that sets your instincts flaring like sparks. You stand slowly, eyes scanning the tree-line. For a moment, nothing moves. Then something does. A shadow slips between two trunks, fast but unmistakable. Not deer, not wolf, human height. You raise your hand to halt Eirik. Your voice drops to a whisper. We're not alone. Your fingers tighten around your axe, not lifting it yet, but ready. Muscles shift beneath fur and leather. Your breath slows. Your eyes sharpen. The forest holds its breath with you. Every twig, every leaf, every patch of earth feels alive, listening, waiting, watching. Another shadow moves. Closer this time. More deliberate. Eirik's jaw clenches. We should head back. Bring word. We should know how many first. You reply. He hesitates, then nods. Trust. Brotherhood forged by countless shield walls. You take one slow step forward. A second. A third. The shadows stop moving. You can feel them now. Not with sight. Not with hearing. With something deeper. The way predators feel each other across distances. Then, from the trees, a voice. Low. Measured. Controlled. You don't belong here. Your heartbeat spikes, but your stance stays steady. No. You answer, scanning for the speaker. This is our land. A pause. Then the voice again. Closer. Not for long. Eirik inhales sharply. That sentence isn't a threat by itself. It's a message. A promise. A warning. Something planned beyond these trees. Beyond these footprints. Beyond this moment. You grip your axe tighter, feeling the cold bite of the steel. Storm coming. You feel it in your bones. And storms in the Viking lands rarely pass quietly. The forest feels different now. Not because the trees have changed, or the snow, or the brittle wind that slips beneath your cloak like an unwelcome thought. No, what has changed is the silence. A new shape has formed inside it. A tension that presses against your ribs, slowing your breath, sharpening your senses until each sound becomes a story of its own. Eirik feels it too. His grip on the spear shifts. Not fear, not panic. Preparation. The voice that spoke from the trees lingers in the air, even though the speaker has gone quiet. Words like cold metal left behind in a wound. Not for long. You've heard threats before. Every warrior has. But this wasn't a bellow of intimidation. It wasn't bravado or arrogance or drunken foolishness. It was the tone of someone who knows something. Something planned. Something set in motion far from the forest's edge. Something marching your way. Your mind races, but your body stays steady. This is instinct. Training. Years of shaping your reactions until you can think one way and act another. You don't let your breath show the tension building beneath your ribs. You scan the tree line. To your left, birch trees, pale as bones. To your right, pines layered thick with snow, branches drooping under winter's weight. Ahead, darkness where sunlight dies before touching the ground. Nothing moves, until something does. A soft crunch, like someone shifting their stance on old snow. Not close, not far. Exactly the distance of someone tracking you, but not enough to commit. Eirik leans slightly toward you, his voice a controlled whisper. 3, maybe 4. 4, you say. 1 by the birch roots. 2 near the old pine. 1 behind a fallen log. You saw all of that. No, I felt it. Another crunch. The forest adjusts. The wind slows. A raven caws once, and then goes silent, as if even it doesn't wish to interfere with what's about to unfold. Eirik exhales. We should leave now. You shake your head slightly. Not yet. We don't walk away blind. He hesitates. Loyalty battles instinct on his face, but you've stood beside him through every raid, every winter hardship, every burial mound carved into frozen ground. He trusts you, and trust is the strongest shield wall. He nods. You take a step forward. Not threatening, not timid. A step that says, I hear you. I see you. I am not prey. The presence in the trees shifts, like weight settling into a new stance. Whoever they are, they understand movement. They're trained. They're not panic boys or lost travelers. They track your position with experienced patience. Your hand moves to your axe, but doesn't lift it. Axe lifted means battle. Axe lowered means conversation. You keep it in between, the way veteran fighters do when the world is choosing what it wants to be. Another voice comes from the forest, this time to your right. Different speaker, younger tone, impatient. Why wait? We should end this. Not a good sign. Youth brings recklessness, and recklessness brings blood. A third voice answers him softly. We wait. The authority in that single word is unmistakable. Eirik tenses. They're the leader. There always is. The forest rustles. A shadow separates from the others, moving forward just enough for you to sense the intention, but not the silhouette. Whoever this leader is, they understand the old dance. Reveal enough to warn, not enough to commit. We know who you are, the leader says calmly. We know your Jarl. We know your hall. We know your borders. Knowledge is a weapon, and this stranger wields it well. Eirik steps half forward, then step into the open and speak like someone with a spine. The leader chuckles quietly. Bravery. Good. You'll need it. You raise your arm, halting Eirik. Say what you came to say. A long pause, and then your lands will change hands soon. You almost laugh, not because it's amusing, but because it's absurd. Your people have held these lands for generations, through famine, war, storms, raids, blood feuds, winters that broke lesser clans. Your ancestors rest beneath the soil here. Their bones anchor this land. Their stories echo through every longhouse beam. Whose hands, you ask? Ours, the leader says simply, and those who march with us. That word, march, lands like a stone in your stomach. A clan alone doesn't march. Armies march. Coalitions march. Desperate groups march. Eirik's eyes widen slightly. How many? The leader's voice grows colder. Enough. Your grip tightens on your axe. Enough. Enough for what? Enough to slip across borders quietly. Enough to test defenses. Enough to overwhelm. Enough to break. You take a slow breath and step forward once more. If war is coming, say so plainly. The leader steps forward too. Just one step. Not far enough for you to see their face, but enough for their shape to differentiate from the shadows. A tall figure, layered furs from a region south of your snows, armor reinforced with bone plates. A traveler who became a fighter who became something more dangerous. Plainly, they answer, war is coming. The words freeze the air. Not a threat, not a warning, a statement of fact. Your pulse steadies. Your mind clears. The forest, the snow, the shadows all align in a single moment of clarity. Then you should leave, you say quietly. Another pause. We will, the leader says. For today, branches rustle. Snow shifts. The presence in the trees dissipates like smoke carried on a sudden wind. One by one, the shadows withdraw, their movement silent, controlled, vanishing deeper into the forest until even your sharpened senses can no longer trace them. Then, finally, the forest breathes again. Eirik exhales sharply, wiping frost from his beard. That was no scouting party, he says. No, you answer. It was a message. You stare into the darkness, where the leader vanished. A storm, yes, but not a simple one. Something larger, older, heavier. A shift in the wind that carries the taste of iron. You turn back toward the village. We tell the Jarl, you say. Eirik nods stiffly. And then what? You adjust the axe at your side, feeling its familiar weight settle against you like a promise. Then, you answer. We prepare for war. Eirik's breath plumed in the air, tight with confusion more than anger. A message? That was a challenge. To come to our borders and speak of taking our land. It is burying the axe in our doorstep. You shook your head. your mind racing through the implications while your body remained deceptively calm. No, a challenge is made with a show of strength. They showed us not their strength, but their intent. That is worse. You began to move back towards the village, your steps quick and silent on the packed snow. Every tree shadow now held a threat. Every whisper of the wind felt like a murmur of their passing. Their words had poisoned the very air of the forest. Knowledge is a weapon, you murmured, almost to yourself. And they have been watching, learning our borders, our Jarl, our hull. That was their first strike. They took our measure. Eirik walked beside you, his knuckles white on his spear's shaft. Then why not fight? There were 4 of them. We are 2. They had a chance. They had no chance, you replied, your voice sharp and clear. Their leader was disciplined. His goal was not to spill blood, but to plant a seed of fear. They have sown it. Now, they withdraw to see if it will grow. The tree line began to thin, the long, low shapes of the village's outer storehouses coming into view. Smoke curled from the central longhouse, a familiar, comforting sight that now felt fragile. We tell the Jarl, Eirik said, the statement feeling both obvious and woefully inadequate. We tell them everything. You agreed. The number, their bearing, their leader's words. The word march. That word hung between you, heavier than any axe. A clan does not march. A war host marches. As you passed the first carved post that marked the village boundary, the daily sounds of life, the clang of a hammer from a smithy, the laughter of children by the well, the lowing of cattle in their winter pen, felt like a stark contrast to the cold silence you had just left. You were carrying the winter back with you. Eirik stopped, turning to you, his face grim. And then what? After we tell him. You looked past him, towards the great hall where the Jarl, your father's friend and your chieftain, would be sitting by the fire. You could already see the storm in his eyes, the grim set of his jaw as the peace he had fought so hard to maintain shattered with the few words from the shadows. Your hand went to the haft of your axe, feeling the familiar grooves worn by your grip, the cold promise of the steel. Then, you said, your voice low and final, we see how deep their roots have already grown. We look for the rot within our own walls before we fear the axe from without. The preparation had begun, not with the ringing of steel, but with the quiet, terrible weight of suspicion. The war had not come with a roar. It had arrived on a whisper, and now it was inside the gates. The great hall was a cavern of firelight and looming shadows, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke, roasting meat, and wet wool. The Jarl bore an stone beard, sat in his high seat, a throne of carved wood and worn pelts. He was a mountain of a man, his once red beard now streaked with iron gray, his face a map of old scars and older wisdom. He listened. He did not interrupt as you spoke, recounting the encounter in the forest with a warrior's precision. The number of shadows, the cadence of their speech, the chilling certainty in the leader's voice. Eirik stood beside you, adding a sharp nod or a low grunt of confirmation. You delivered the message like a handed blade, careful not to cut yourself on its edges. When you fell silent, the only sound was the crackle of the central fire. The Jarl's fingers stroked his beard, his eyes, the color of a winter sky, fixed on something far beyond the smoke-blackened rafters. A message, he rumbled. The word not a question, but a verdict. You were right. They did not come for a skirmish. They came to see if we would flinch. He leaned forward, the wood of his chair groaning. The word march. You are certain. As certain as the steel in my hand, Jarl, you said. A low murmur rippled through the other huskrulls, and elders gathered in the hall. You saw the reactions play out on their faces. The hot anger in young Oliver's eyes, the calculating worry on the face of Kettle, the silver-haired law speaker, the grim acceptance on the scarred visage of Gunhild, the captain of the watch. The Fjallgren clan, spat Oliver, gripping his axe. It must be. They have coveted the southern passes for generations. Or the sea wolves from the east, countered Kettle. Their longships grow bold. A land march would be a new tactic, but not beyond them. The Jarl let the theories clash in the air for a moment before raising a hand for silence. His gaze settled on you. You stood in their presence. You looked into the shadows where their leader stood. What do your instincts say? Not your thoughts. Your gut. You closed your eyes for a heartbeat, returning to the frozen glade, the tone of the voice, the shape of the shadow, the way the others obeyed. It was not the Fjallgrim, you said, opening your eyes. Their threats are like summer thunder, loud and empty. This was different. This was colder, and it was not the sea wolves. Their pride would have demanded they show their faces. This leader valued control over glory. You met the Jarl's gaze. This is not an old feud. This is something new. An alliance, perhaps, or a power we have not yet met. The Jarl held your look for a long moment, then gave a slow, grave nod. A new enemy with old knowledge. That is a dangerous combination. He stood, his presence filling the hall. The chatter died instantly. Then we answer not as a single clan, but as a people, he declared, his voice echoing off the walls. Gunhill, double the watch. Triple the patrols along the high passes. Kettle, send riders. To the Fjallgrim, to the sea wolves, to every Jarl and chieftain within 5 days' ride. Do not speak of the threat. Speak only of a gathering, a moot. Let no one know our fear. He turned back to you and Eirik. As for you too, you have brought the warning. Now you will hunt the warning. Take a fast boat down the river. Go to the trading post at Greymist Bay. Listen, men talk more freely when they are far from home and full of ale. Find the source of this march. Find the name of this shadow who speaks of taking my land. His eyes were flint. Do not be seen. Do not be heard. Be ghosts. And if you find a thread that leads back to this new enemy, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried through the silent hall, do not cut it. Pull it, and see what unravels. The Jarl's command hung in the smoky air of the hall, a charge that settled on your shoulders with the weight of a mail coat. A ghost's work. It demanded a different kind of strength than standing shield to shield in the line. It required the patience of a hunter and the silence of a falling snowflake. The preparations were swift and shrouded in deliberate normalcy. You and Eirik did not don your best war gear. Instead, you chose worn, unremarkable tunics and cloaks of coarse, undyed wool, the garb of trappers or minor traders. Your weapons were carefully selected. A sturdy seeks at your belt and a hand axe, its haft worn smooth, tucked into a loop. You left your fine-patterned swords and engraved spearheads behind. They were the badges of a warrior, and you were to be invisible. The fast boat was a lean, shallow-draft river craft, built for speed and stealth over the open fury of the Whale Road. Its hull was tarred a dark, pitch black, and its single square sail was patched and faded. As you loaded provisions, hard bread, smoked fish, a small cask of fresh water, Eirik ran a hand along the gunwale. A far cry from a sea serpent, he muttered, referring to the great longship they had raided in for 3 summers. The sea serpent breaks waves and hearts, you replied, securing a leather pack. This boat, it whispers, and right now, whispers are what we need. You pushed off from the dock in the pre-dawn gloom, the mist clinging to the water like a shroud. The village, your entire world, receded into the darkness, its fires becoming mere pinpricks of light before vanishing entirely. You were alone on the river. The only sounds the gentle lap of water against the hull and the occasional dip of your oars as you guided the boat into the current. The journey downriver was a lesson in shifting landscapes and mindsets. The steep, pine-clad valleys of your homeland gradually softened, the mountains yielding to rolling hills and wider, slower stretches of water. The air lost its sharp, icy bite, gaining a damp, peaty chill. You spoke little. Both of you lost in the immensity of the task. The Jarl's words echoed in your mind. Pull the thread. See what unravels. But where was the thread? In a crowded trading post, amidst a babble of tongues and the clink of trade silver? For 3 days and 2 nights, you navigated, camping on desolate riverbanks, cooking small fires that produced more smoke than flame. You practiced the art of being unmemorable, hunching your shoulders, softening the confident warrior's gait into a trader's plod. On the morning of the 4th day, A new smell carried on the wind, the tang of salt, of rotting seaweed, and beneath it, the complex scent of humanity, wood smoke, cooking food, and waste. Grey Mist Bay was not a town, but a sprawling, chaotic settlement clinging to the edge of the land where the river met the sea. It was a place of temporary structures and permanent vice. Long, low trading halls built of rough-hewn timber stood beside sod-roofed bunkhouses. The docks were a forest of masts from the elegant, serpent-prowed longships of the coastal clans to the broader, higher-sided knarrs of the southern traders. The air was a cacophony of shouted deals, the screech of gulls, the rhythmic thud of woodworking mallets, and a dozen different languages crashing together like waves on a shore. You secured your boat amidst a tangle of smaller fishing craft, paying a sullen-looking boy a small silver coin to keep an eye on it, knowing full well the payment was more for his silence than his vigilance. The trading post was a vast, dim hall, the air so thick with smoke from the central fire pits, it was like breathing soup. The ground was packed earth, strewn with soiled rushes. Men, and a few formidable women, of every conceivable origin crowded around rough-hewn tables. There were Northmen with braided beards and tattooed skin, their eyes sharp with calculation. There were swarthy traders from the southern coasts in colorful, stained robes, their fingers heavy with rings. There were hulking, silent men from the eastern plains, their language a series of guttural barks. The scent of roasting meat, sour ale, and unwashed bodies was overwhelming. You found a space at the end of a crowded bench, your backs to the wall, a warrior's habit you could not break. Eirik ordered 2 horns of the local ale, a cloudy, bitter brew that smelled faintly of bog moss. This was the heart of the Jarl's plan. Here, far from the rigid hierarchies and watchful eyes of home, tongues were loosened by drink and distance. Here, a man might boast of a coming campaign to impress a companion, or complain about a mustering that pulled him from his farm. For hours, you did nothing but listen. You heard a grizzled shipmaster from the Fjallgren lands loudly bemoaning a tax on iron. You overheard 2 sea wolves arguing over the price of good Baltic amber. There was talk of a poor harvest in the south, of a sickness in an eastern settlement, of a prized stud horse sold for a fortune, but nothing of armies. Nothing of marches. The frustration began to gnaw at you. It was like sifting through a mountain of gravel for a single, specific grain of sand. As the afternoon wore into evening, the crowd grew louder, more boisterous. A fight broke out near the door. A brief, brutal explosion of fists and a shattered bench that was just as quickly broken up by the hall's formidable guards. In the lull that followed, your eyes, scanning the room, caught a different kind of tension. Near the fire, a group of men were drinking, but not with the raucous joy of the others. They were quieter, more intent. They wore good, practical wool and leather. Their weapons, long knives and hand axes, were of solid, unadorned quality. They were not traders. They had the look of seasoned fighters, but they lacked the flamboyant pride of dedicated raiders. They were professional. You nudged Eirik with your knee, a slight motion of your head directing his gaze. He gave an almost imperceptible nod, his own eyes narrowing. One of the men, a broad-shouldered individual with a badly broken nose, was speaking in a low, earnest tone to his companions. You caught only fragments, your hearing straining against the din. Not just a summer raid, the man with the broken nose said. Promised a share of the settled lands, not just plunder. Another, younger man with a nervous look shook his head. Don't like it. Fighting in the deep snow. The Stonebeard's men are tough. The Stonebeard won't be a problem for long, Broken Nose replied, a cruel smile twisting his lips. The Skull Splitter has a plan for him, a personal meeting. The name hit you like a physical blow. The Skull Splitter. You knew it only from traders' tales and the warnings of scouts. A warlord from the desolate, glacier-scoured islands to the far north. A man said to be more beast than human, who had united the scattered, savage clans of the ice fjords through sheer brutality. He was a specter, a story to frighten children. But he was not supposed to be here, not south of the Great Mountains. Your heart hammered against your ribs, but you forced your face to remain a placid mask. You took a slow drink of your ale, the bitter taste suddenly sharp and clear. This was it, the thread. Irik's hand was clenched so tight around his horn his knuckles were white. You met his eyes and gave a tiny, sharp shake of your head. Not yet. You listened, every sense screaming, as Broken Nose continued, his voice dropping even lower. You leaned forward slightly, as if interested in a conversation at a nearby table, straining to catch the words. Gathering at the Serpent's Tooth, he murmured, the Skull Splitter's own ship. Then, with the first thaw, we move up the river. The scouts have already marked the watch posts. We'll be at their Jarl's Hall before they can light the warning beacons. The plan was as cold and sharp as a surgeon's knife. A lightning strike up the river, the very artery of your homeland, using the thaw you had all been eagerly awaiting as their cover. The personal meeting for the Jarl, it could only mean assassination. The man with the broken nose stood, swaying slightly from the ale. One more round, then we go. The tide waits for no man, and the Skull Splitter waits for no one. As he moved toward the ale keg, his path brought him right past your table. His eyes, small and piggish, swept over you with dismissive disinterest. You were just two more anonymous faces in the murk. As he passed, the hem of his cloak caught on a splinter in the table, jerking him slightly. He cursed, yanking it free, and in that moment, something small and metallic fell from a pouch at his belt, landing with a soft thud in the rushes by your foot. He didn't notice, continuing on his way. You waited a beat, then casually dropped your own eating knife, bending down to retrieve it. Your fingers closed not only around your knife's hilt, but also around the fallen object. You straightened up and placed both on the table, shielding the new item with your hand. It was a token, a small, crudely cast piece of pewter, stamped not with the intricate beastwork of your people, but with a simple, brutal symbol, a splintered long bone, crossed by a single heavy axe. The mark of the Skull Splitter. You looked at Irik, the truth passing between you in a single, locked gaze. The shadow in the forest had a name. The vague thread had a face, a plan, and a timetable. The thread was in your hand. The ghost work was over. Now the race began. The token felt ice-cold and impossibly heavy in your palm, a sliver of damned truth amidst the hall's roaring falsehoods. You closed your fist around it, the crude edges of the splintered bone symbol biting into your skin. The ale-soaked chaos of the trading post faded into a dull roar, a distant storm against the single, sharp point of your focus. Irik's face was a stone mask, but his eyes were live embers. The Serpent's Tooth, he breathed, the name of venomous whisper. We know that rock. It's a day's hard sail north from here. A cursed place. You gave a curt nod, your mind already mapping the currents, the winds, the first thaw. You said, the words tasting of ashes. They mean to use the breaking ice as their drumbeat. The imagery was terrifyingly apartment. The thaw was a time of hope, of release, of rivers opening like veins to bring life back to the land. They would turn it into a highway for death, silencing the warning beacons with swift, brutal efficiency. The group of Skull Splitter's men were finishing their round, draining their horns with grim purpose. The one with the broken nose clapped a companion on the shoulder, his laughter a harsh bark that cut through the din. They were moving, preparing to leave with the tide, to report to their warlord, to finalize the invasion. We cannot let them reach the Serpent's Tooth, Irik stated, his hand drifting to the Sikhs at his belt. The meaning was clear. A knife in the dark alley. A swift, silent end for all four of them. It was the obvious move. The warrior's move. Cut the head from this particular snake. But the Jarl's command echoed in your mind, wiser and more cold-blooded than any battlefield instinct. Do not cut it. Pull it, and see what unravels. No, you said, the word final. Irik stared at you, incredulous. You opened your fist, revealing the token. If they die here mysteriously, the Skull Splitter will know his plan is compromised. He will change it. He might attack sooner, with even greater force. We would be blind again. Then what? Irik hissed, frustration boiling in his whisper. We wish them fair winds and follow. Exactly, you said, a dangerous, sharp-edged plan forming in your mind. We are ghosts, Eirik, and now we will haunt them. You move with speed that belied your calm, leaving a few coins on the table. You melted into the crowd, Eirik a shadow at your heel. You reached the doorway just as the four men emerged, blinking in the dull gray light of the bay. You kept your distance, using the chaotic throng of the dock as your cover. Your postures slumped, your movements unhurried. You were two more anonymous souls in a place of transience. You watched them board a sleek, six-oared Snecja, its lines lean and predatory, its sail neatly furled. It was a ship built for speed and stealth, not for hauling plunder. A scout ship, a messenger of doom. As their oars bit into the water, pulling them away from the dock and into the main channel of the bay, you turned to Eirik. The tide is turning. They will ride the ebb flow out of the bay and then north, hugging the coast. Our boat will never catch them in open water, Eirik said, his gaze fixed on the departing Snecja. We are not taking the sea road, you replied, already striding back towards the river where your own craft was tied. We are taking the land path, the cliff trail. Eirik's breath caught. That is a 2-day walk for fresh man. We have less than a day, and it is suicide in the dark. It is the only way to get ahead of them, you said, your voice leaving no room for argument. They must sail around the headlands. We will cut across them. The cliff trail was not a trail for traders. It was a hunter's path, a dizzying ribbon of rock and root that clawed its way across the face of the coastal mountains. It was treacherous in full daylight by night. It was a pact with the Allfather himself. You gathered what you needed from the boat. Coils of rope, your hand axes, a water skin, and a small pouch of dried meat. There was no time for anything else. The race was on. The first part of the trail was a brutal, lung-burning ascent through dense, dripping forest. The light faded quickly, the world shrinking to the small circle of gray ahead of you. Then the trees fell away, and the true test began. The path narrowed to a ledge no wider than your boot, with the black rock face on one side and a sheer drop to the roaring, unseen sea on the other. The wind here was a living thing, a furious giant that tried to pluck you from your perch and dash you onto the rocks below. You moved like mountain goats, your senses stretched to a razor's edge. Every handhold was tested, every step placed with absolute precision. There was no room for error. A loose stone, kicked free by your foot, would clatter down the cliff face for a terrifyingly long time before being swallowed by the roar of the waves. You did not speak. Breath was a precious commodity. The only communication was the occasional touch of a hand, a pointed finger towards a secure-looking root, a silent warning of a crumbling section of path. The cold seeped into your bones, a deep, aching chill that the physical exertion could not entirely dispel. Hours bled together in a timeless grind of fear and focus. Sometime deep in the night, you reached the highest point, a windswept spine of rock. For a moment, you risked a glance north, and there, far below, you saw it, a faint, ghostly wake, a sliver of darker movement against the Black Sea. The Snecja. They were making good time, their oars a steady, relentless rhythm against the current. But you were ahead of them. A fierce, grim satisfaction surged through you. You had stolen a march on death itself. The descent was, if possible, more terrifying than the climb. Fatigue was a clawed beast on your back, threatening to betray your tired muscles. Dawn was beginning to bleed a pale, watery light into the eastern sky when you finally, blessedly, stumbled off the trail and onto a pebble-strewn beach at the base of the northern headland. You were bruised, bleeding from a dozen scrapes, and trembling with exhaustion. But you were there. You collapsed behind a large driftwood log, your chest heaving. The serpent's tooth, a jagged fong of black rock, rose from the sea less than a mile away, and clustered in its lee, hidden from the open sea, was a sight that froze the blood in your veins. It was not just the Snecja. It was a fleet. 5 longships, their dragon-headed prows shrouded in canvas, lay at anchor. They were larger than any raiding ship, true warships, each capable of carrying 40 men or more. Campfires winked on the shore, and the shapes of many men moved between them. The scale of it was staggering. This was not a raid. This was an army. The Snekja you had followed was gliding smoothly into the cove, heading towards the largest of the longships, a monstrous vessel whose prow was carved into the shape of a snarling, skeletal wolf, the Skullsplitter's personal ship. You watched hidden as the Snekja drew alongside the great longship. The man with the broken nose climbed aboard and was met by a figure who could only be the Skullsplitter himself. Even from this distance, the warlord was a figure of nightmare. He stood a head taller than any man around him, his bulk encased in a coat of dark, overlapping bone plates. His head was shaved, and even from here, you could see the pale, ritual scars that covered his scalp and face. He listened to Broken Nose report, then threw his head back and let out a laugh that carried across the water, a sound like cracking ice. The message had been delivered. The plan was confirmed. Eirik lay beside you, his face pale. By the gods, 200 men, maybe more. You said nothing. The token was still clenched in your fist. You had pulled the thread, and what had unraveled was a nightmare far greater than you had ever imagined. You had the name, the face, the place, and the strength of the enemy. The ghosts had done their work. Now the warriors had to get home, and they had to do it faster than the storm gathering in the cove behind them. The first thaw was coming, and you were the only warning your people would get. The sight of the war fleet was a physical blow, driving the air from your lungs. 200 men. The number echoed in the hollow of your chest. A death knell for your village, your Jarl, everything you knew. The Skullsplitter's laughter, that sound of cracking ice, felt like a splinter working its way into your soul. There was no time for the crushing weight of despair. Every moment spent on this beach was a moment stolen from your people's chance to survive. The river, you breathed, your voice raw from climb and the cold. We cannot outrun the ships at sea. Our only path is back the way we came. Eirik's eyes were wide, fixed on the monstrous longship. The cliff trail. Again, we'll never make it. We're half dead already. We are not going back over the cliffs, you said, your mind racing, discarding options until only one desperate path remained. We take the Kestrel's run. Eirik's head snapped towards you, his expression one of pure disbelief. That is not a path. It is a death sentence. The rocks do not have 200 blood-mad warriors behind them. You interrupted, your voice low and fierce. The run will take us directly to the river's upper bend. We can be in our boat and halfway home before that fleet has even raised its sails. The Kestrel's run was a name spoken only in whispers, a shoot of treacherous, loose scree that fell from the headlands directly down to the river valley below. It was a shortcut used only by fools and the doomed, a near-vertical descent where a single misstep would send you cartwheeling onto jagged stones. There was no alternative. You turned your back on the fleet, on the Skullsplitter, and began to climb once more, not back towards the dreaded cliff trail, but upwards, towards the bald summit of the headland. The wind at the top was a screaming fury, tearing at your clothes, threatening to pluck you from the edge. Below, the Kestrel's run yawned open, a steep, ugly scar of shattered granite and unstable shale, falling away into the morning mist. You sat, bracing your boots against the first large rock. We control the fall. Use your axe as a brake. Dig in your heels. Do not try to stand. Eirik looked from you to the chute, his face a mask of grim resignation. He gave a single, sharp nod. You pushed off. The world became a roaring, shuddering chaos of sliding stone and jarring impacts. You half slid, half fell, your body tossed and battered by the shifting scree. You dragged the haft of your hand axe behind you, spraying a fan of sparks and dirt, the force wrenching your shoulder. Small, sharp rocks ripped at your hands and face. It was not a descent. It was a controlled fall, a brutal negotiation with gravity itself. Your cloak tore. A gash opened on your forehead, the blood warm and sticky in the cold air. Beside you, you heard Eirik grunt with each brutal impact. The river at the bottom rushed up to meet you with terrifying speed. The end of the chute spat you out onto the soft, muddy bank of the river. You landed in a heap, your body a single, throbbing ache. For a long moment, you just lay there, gasping, the world spinning. The sound of the river was a gentle murmur compared to the roaring descent. Eirik groaned, pushing himself to his knees. He was bleeding from a cut on his lip. His tunic was in tatters, but the fire in his eyes was undimmed. "I hate kestrels," he managed between ragged breaths. You forced yourself upright, your muscles screaming in protest. Every breath was a knife in your ribs, but you were down, and your boat was just a short, painful jog downstream. The run back to the boat was a blur of agony. You found the boy you'd paid still lurking nearby. He stared at your battered, bloodied forms with wide, frightened eyes. You didn't speak, merely unlooped the rope and shoved the boat into the current. Stumbling aboard, "Row," you commanded, your voice a broken croak. And you rowed. You rowed as the sun climbed, your abused muscles burning, your wounds weeping. You rowed against the current that would soon carry your enemies, your oars biting into the water with the frantic, desperate rhythm. The familiar landscape of your homeland, which had always been a source of comfort, was now a countdown. Every bend in the river, every familiar stand of trees, was a marker of how little time was left. You did not stop at the village. You drove the boat straight onto the mudbank below the Jarl's Hall, stumbling out and staggering up the path, your breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. The guards at the door saw your state, and their spears came up, their faces alarmed. You shoved past them, bursting into the great hall. Jarl Boren was at his high seat, in council with Gunhild and Kettle. They all turned. The Jarl's face, which had been lined with worry, now hardened into a mask of stone as he took in your bloodied, dirt-caked forms. The wild look in your eyes. You didn't bow. You didn't offer a formal greeting. You staggered to the center of the hall, and from your torn and filthy tunic, you drew the pewter token. You flung it onto the rush-strewn floor at the Jarl's feet. It landed with a dull, final clink. "The skull splitter," you rasped, your voice echoing in the stunned silence of the hall. 5 longships, 200 men or more. They gather at the Serpent's Tooth. They march with the first thaw. You looked up, meeting the Jarl's horrified gaze, your own eyes blazing with the truth you had hauled back from the edge of the world. "The war is not coming, my Jarl," you said, the words falling like hammer blows. "It is already here, and we are all that stands in its way." For heartbeat, the hall was frozen in a silence more profound than the one in the forest. The only sound was the ragged saw of your own breath and the soft, final clatter of the token as it settled on the rushes. The Jarl's eyes were locked on the pewter disc, on the brutal, undeniable truth it represented. Then, the stone mask of his face shattered into action. He rose from his high seat, not like a man, but like a mountain coming to life. The shock in his eyes was incinerated by a cold, furious fire. He did not shout. His voice, when it came, was low and carried the grinding weight of glacier ice. "Gunhild," he said, and the captain of the watch snapped to attention as if struck. "Sound the war horn. Now, not the warning signal. The muster. 3 long blasts, repeated. Every man, woman, and child who can hold a tool or carry a stone to the palisade." The woman's face, usually so composed, was pale, but her nod was sharp. She turned and ran from the hall, her boots pounding on the packed earth. "Kettle." The Jarl's gaze swept to the lost beaker. "The riders you sent. Recall them. Send new ones. Not to call a moot, to cry for aid. Tell every Jarl, every chieftain, that Borenstone Beard calls in every blood debt, every oath of alliance. The skull splitter is at our gate. If we fall, the flood will wash over them next." Kettle, his old eyes wide, simply bowed his head and hurried out, his scrolls of genealogy and treaties forgotten. This was beyond law. This was survival. The Jarl's eyes finally returned to you and Eirik, taking in your tattered state. The blood, the dirt, the sheer exhaustion that threatened to buckle your knees. "You," he said, and there was a depth of respect in that single word that made the trials of the cliff and the chute feel worth it. "You have given us our only chance. A slim one, but a chance." He gestured to a thrall. "Get them food. Mead. See to their wounds. You have 1 hour, no more. You did not argue. As the first, deep, mournful blast of the war horn echoed through the village, a sound that had not been heard in a generation, you let yourself be led to a bench by the fire. A horn of strong mead was thrust into your hand, and the warmth of it spread through your frozen core. The hall, once a place of counsel and comfort, was now a storm of organized chaos. Men were already pouring in, their faces a mixture of confusion, fear, and grim determination, grabbing shields and axes from the walls. Outside, the 3 long blasts of the horn continued, a relentless, terrifying heartbeat. You could hear the sounds of the village transforming, the shouts of commanders, the cries of children being herded into the hall for safety, the frantic chopping of wood as the palisade was reinforced, the screech of sharpening stones on steel. Eirik, chewing on a piece of smoked meat, looked at you, his eyes hollow with fatigue but alight with purpose. We lit the beacon. You nodded, finishing the mead. The warmth was not just from the drink. It was from the fire now burning in your own heart. The fear was gone, burned away in the desperate race home. What remained was a clear, cold certainty. This was your land, your people, your Jarl. The hour passed in a blink. A young huskarl brought you a clean, padded gambeson and a coat of well-oiled mail. You shrugged into the familiar weight, the iron rings settling on your shoulders like a second skin. You buckled your own fine sword, the one you had left behind, around your waist. It felt different now. Not a tool of the raid, but a pillar of the shield wall. You walked out of the hall, Eirik at your side, and the village was unrecognizable. The peaceful trading post was gone, replaced by a fortress preparing for a siege. The air thrummed with purpose. Women and elders were piling stones and cauldrons of water atop the walkways of the palisade. The smithy roared, the hammer falling in a constant, frantic rhythm as every piece of metal was turned into a weapon or a repair. The Jarl was on the fighting platform above the main gate, his bearskin cloak thrown over his mail. He saw you and gestured you up. From this vantage point, you looked down the river, the very artery that had brought you life, and that would now bring death. The first thaw was a tangible presence in the air. The ice at the edges of the river was soft and rotten, the snow on the roofs dripping steadily. They will come with the dawn, the Jarl said, his voice quiet beside you. The thaw will be their signal. They will think to find us asleep, our warning beacons cold. He turned to you, his gaze sweeping over the frantic, determined activity below. You bought us this night. You bought us the chance to stand ready. He placed a heavy hand on your shoulder, his grip like iron. I have 30 seasoned warriors, another 40 farmers and fishermen who can hold a line. Against 200, the numbers are a slaughter. You met his gaze, the clarity of the moment settling upon you like a mantle. Then we will not let it be a slaughter. We will make them pay for every inch of mud with a mountain of their dead. We will make the Skull Splitter's victory taste so of ash and blood that his own men will wonder if it was worth it. A grim, proud smile touched the Jarl's lips. That is the spirit that has held this land for generations. He looked back towards the river. The first blow is yours. You who saw them coming. You will stand in the center of the wall, beside me. The honor was immense, a testament to the ghost work you had done. The center was where the fight would be thickest, where the enemy warlord would aim his spear point. You nodded, your hand resting on the pommel of your sword. Below, the final preparations continued under the gray, weeping sky. Sharpened stakes were being driven into the riverbank. The last families were being secured within the hall. The shield wall was forming, a bristling line of oak and iron in grim-faced resolve. The forest had been a prelude. The chase had been a warning. The long night of preparation was over. Now there was only the wait for the dawn, the wait for the sight of dragon-prowed ships sliding out of the mist, the wait for the war cry that would shake the very foundations of the world you knew. You stood on the wall, the wind cooling the sweat on your brow, and you waited, not with fear, but with a cold, patient fury. The storm was coming, and you were ready to meet it with steel and fire. The gray light of a dying day bled into the deep, bruised purple of a war dawn. The air was cold and heavy, thick with the scent of wet earth, wood smoke, and the sharp, metallic tang of fear. The constant, purposeful noise of the night had faded, replaced by a silence that was somehow louder. It was the silence of a drawn bowstring, of a collective, held breath. You stood in the center of the shield wall, your shoulder pressed against the Jarl's, the rough wood of the palisade at your back. To your other side, Eirik hefted a spear, his knuckles white, his breathing a controlled, steady rhythm. The line of warriors stretched to either side along the walkway, a grim tapestry of iron helmets, round shields painted with forgotten gods and family sigils, and eyes fixed on the river. The thaw had truly begun. The river, which had been a slumbering giant of ice, now groaned and cracked, its dark, swift-running water, carrying jagged white flows downstream like a shattered army. It was the perfect cover for the sound of oars. And then you saw them. They did not come with a roar. They came like a sickness, emerging from the low-hanging mist that clung to the water. First, the dragon-headed prows, their carved sneers seeming to taste the air. Then the long, dark hulls, the oars dipping and rising in a terrible, unison rhythm that was the only sound besides the cracking ice and the beating of your own heart. 5 of them, the Skull Splitter's fleet. They moved with an arrogant, unhurried grace, knowing the surprise was theirs, expecting to find a village still asleep. As the lead ship, the one with the skeletal wolf prow, slid into the wider pool before the village, a figure stood in its bow. Even at this distance, the Skull Splitter's massive, bone-plated form was unmistakable. He raised a fist, and the oars lifted, holding the ship steady in the current. The silence stretched taut and terrible. He was surveying his prize, the palisade lined with silent, waiting warriors. There was no panic, no cries of alarm, only a wall of silent defiance. You saw the moment his expectation curdled into understanding. His plan had been unmasked. The easy slaughter was denied. His head tilted. A predator assessing a prey that had unexpectedly grown teeth. Then his voice cut across the water, a guttural roar of fury and command. Shields. The order was not for his men, but a mocking echo of what he expected to hear from you. From the decks of the longships, a deep-throated chant began, a wordless, rhythmic pounding of spears on shields that was meant to break nerve before a single blow was struck. It was the sound of impending doom. Jarl Boren did not flinch. He simply raised his own voice, calm and immense, a rock against the storm wave. "For your fathers," he bellowed, his words rolling over the village. "For your children, for the soil beneath our feet." A single, unified roar answered him from the wall, a sound of pure, defiant spirit that drowned out the enemy's chant. It was the sound of a people who had chosen to stand. The Skull Splitter answered with a forward sweep of his arm. The first wave of his warriors leaped from the ships into the chest-deep, freezing water. They were not the disciplined Huskarls, but the berserkers and the young bloods, their faces painted, their eyes wild, howling as they waded towards the bank, axes and swords held high. They believed their fury would break us. "Archers!" Gunhild's voice rang out from further down the wall. A soft hiss filled the air, and a black cloud of arrows arced up from behind the palisade. They fell among the waiting men with a terrible, wet sound. Some fell silently, swallowed by the current. Others roared and came on, arrows protruding from shoulders and shields. They began to clamber up the muddy bank, towards the sharpened stakes and the waiting wall. This was the moment. The world narrowed to the few feet of mud and death before the gate. You braced your shield. Eirik leveled his spear. The Jarl hefted his great, two-handed axe. The first of them, a hulking man with a rusted axe and a boar skull helmet, reached the stakes. He hacked at one, snarling, and tried to push through the gap. Now the Jarl roared. Eirik's spear shot out over your shield. Not a wild thrust, but a precise, pitiless strike. The point took the boar warrior in the throat, just above his leather gorget. His roar became a wet gurgle, and he fell back, yanking the spear from Eirik's grip. There was no time to think. The next one was on you. A younger man, his face a mask of fear and frenzy, swinging a sword wildly at your head. You caught the blow on your shield, the impact jolting up your arm, and answered with a low, hard thrust of your own sword under the shield's rim. The steel slid between his ribs, and the frenzy in his eyes died, replaced by vacant surprise. You shoved him back with your shield, pulling your blade free. The world became a nightmare of screaming faces, splintering wood, and the deafening clash of iron. The air was thick with the smell of blood and sweat. A spear point scraped against your helmet, setting your ears ringing. You answered with a downward chop of your sword that bit deep into an exposed shoulder. You fought not as an individual, but as part of a single, breathing organism, the shield wall. You protected the man to your left, trusted the man to your right to protect you. The Jarl was an anchor, his great axe sweeping in deadly arcs, clearing space, breaking shields, and shattering bones. But the tide was relentless. For everyone that fell, two more seemed to take his place. They were stacking shields, trying to create a ramp of their own dead to scale the palisade. The pressure on the wall was immense, constant, grinding weight. You saw Oliver the young, hot-headed warrior go down, a hand axe buried in his leg. He was dragged back by the women tending the wounded, his place immediately taken by a gray-bearded fisherman wielding a wood axe. They were dying, they were killing, but they were not breaking. Then a new sound rose above the din, a deep, blaring war horn, but it did not come from the river. It came from the tree line to the north. On the wall, a flicker of uncertainty passed through the defenders. Had the skull splitter flanked them? But the Jarl's voice bored out, filled not with despair, but with a wild, defiant hope. The riders, Kettle's riders. From the edge of the forest, a line of horsemen emerged. Not a vast army, but 30, maybe 40. The riders he had sent for aid. They had not brought armies, but they had come themselves. The Fjallgren banner flew beside the sea wolf symbol. They had answered the call. With a thunder of hooves and a cry that shook the heavens, they hit the skull splitter's flank. The effect was instantaneous. The relentless pressure on the wall slackened as the invaders turned to face this new, unexpected threat from the land. The battle, which had been a brutal, concentrated push against the gate, suddenly fragmented into a chaotic melee on the riverbank. The skull splitter from his ship saw it. You saw his massive form stiffen. His perfect, surprise attack had been discovered. His easy prey had fought like wolves. And now reinforcements, however small, had arrived. His victory was slipping through his fingers, turning into a costly, messy brawl. He bellowed an order, his voice raw with fury. On the bank, his warriors heard it. The fight went out of them. They began to disengage, falling back towards their ships, covering each other as they went, dragging their wounded with them. The attack was over, as the last of his men scrambled aboard in the longships. Their oars churning the bloody water, began to back away into the mist from which they came. The skull splitter turned. His gaze swept the blood-stained palisade, the bodies littering the bank, and for a single frozen moment, his eyes met yours. It was not a look of defeat, but of promise, a vow written in ice and blood. Then he was gone, his ship swallowed by the mist. A ragged cheer went up from a wall, a sound of exhaustion, relief, and pain. But you did not cheer. You leaned on your sword, your body trembling with spent adrenaline, your breath pluming in the cold air. You had held. The village stood. The storm had been weathered. But as you looked at the cost, the dead and dying being carried from the wall, the blood staining the snow and mud, you knew the Jarl's words were true. This was not a victory. It was a respite. The skull splitter had tasted their strength. He would be back, and the next storm would be worse. V. Bolum 14 Albiderellum. The ragged cheer died quickly, smothered by the weight of the cost. The air, once sharp with the promise of snow, was now thick and cloying with the smell of iron, smoke, and opened earth. The victory was a hollow, aching thing. You stood on the wall, your hand still clenched tight around the grip of your sword. The blade stained dark. Your body trembled with a deep, cellular exhaustion, every muscle screaming, every cut and bruise throbbing in time with your heartbeat. Beside you, Eirik leaned heavily on the palisade, his breath a ragged saw. He had lost his helmet, and a deep gash above his eyebrow seeped blood down the side of his face. Below, the scene was one of brutal industry. The triumphant chaos of the repelled assault had given way to the grim, quiet work of survival. The wounded were being carried gently towards the great hall, which had been transformed from a feasting place into a surgeon's den. The moans of men and the sharp scent of searing herbs and poultices drifted out. The dead, both friend and foe, were being separated. Your own were laid with reverence in a growing row, their shields placed over their faces. The enemy dead were being dragged to a pyre that was already being built downwind, its purpose grim and functional. Jarl Boren moved among his people, his great axe slung over his shoulder, his bare pelt cloak spattered with mud and blood. He placed a hand on a shoulder here, knelt by a wounded man there, his voice a low, steady rumble. But when his gaze met yours, the mask of the steadfast leader cracked for a single, unguarded moment. You saw the immense, crushing weight in his eyes. The cost of the stone he had just bought was written in the faces of the dead. He climbed the platform to stand beside you, his eyes scanning the retreating mist on the river as if he could still see the ghost of the Skullsplitter's fleet. "We held," he said, the words flat, devoid of triumph. "We held," you echoed, the statement feeling as insubstantial as the morning fog. "He will be back," the Jarl continued, his voice dropping. "He knows our strength now. He knows the lay of our walls. He will not come with surprise next time. He will come with siege, with fire, with patience." He turned to you, his face etched with anew, grim lines. This was not the end. It was the beginning of the true war. The truth of it settled over you, colder than the winter air. The skirmish at the gate, for all its blood and terror, had been but the first, testing blow. The real fight, a war of attrition, of supply, of endurance, was now upon them. The alliances, you said, thinking of the riders who had arrived in the nick of time. We must make them stronger, binding. The Jarl gave a slow, weary nod. Kettle is already drafting the messages. We have proven we are not an easy bite. That makes us a valuable ally, or a dangerous enemy to ignore. But alliances are fickle things, woven from silver and shared threats. The Skullsplitter can offer plunder. We can only offer a share of the bleeding. He looked out over the village, at the people tending their wounded, shoring up the broken sections of the palisade, their movements slow with fatigue and grief. We have bought time. A season, perhaps. The spring will come, and with it, the real test. He placed a heavy hand on your shoulder, his grip still firm, still filled with the iron will that had held the wall. Rest. Heal. The work is not done. It has only just begun. He moved away, descending back into the heart of his wounded, grieving people. Eirik pushed himself upright, wincing as he put weight on his leg. "What now?" he asked, his voice hoarse. You finally sheathed your sword, the act feeling like a solemn vow. You looked from the pyre of the enemy dead to the row of your own fallen, their shields a silent testament. You looked at the river, now peaceful and empty, but which would one day again carry death. You looked at the hall, where the future of your clan was being painfully stitched back together. The path of the warrior was simple. Stand, fight, protect. But the path ahead was murkier, woven from diplomacy, logistics, and the cold, patient art of waiting for a storm you knew was coming. Now, you said, your voice low and steady, filled with a resolve that had been forged in the forest, tested on the cliff, and hardened on the wall. We rebuild. We strengthen our walls, yes, but we also strengthen our bonds. We prepare for the long night, not just the quick storm. You turned your back on the river, on the ghost of the enemy, and began to descend the platform, your steps heavy but certain. The Skullsplitter thinks this was a battle, you said, the words carried away on the wind. He is wrong. This was the oath that we will endure. And as you walked into the heart of your wounded home, ready to shoulder the next burden, you knew the story was far from over. It was simply entering a new, darker chapter. The shield wall had held. Now, they had to build a nation that could survive what came next.